Alrighty, welcome back to the Silver Tune. So tonight, I'm going to be giving my review of the Pink Tape. Now I know the Pink Tape has been out for a good while. I know people already got their reviews out. I know people already was complaining. I know people was deriding. That's besides the point. I'm giving my personal opinion on this album, and hopefully you walk away with something useful, and hopefully you check out the album yourself. So the Pink Tape is Lil Uzi's seventh studio album, and it comes 3 years after Eternal Atake. Now, in this album, Lil Uzi flirts with the punk rock aesthetic, which is to be expected, but he still is incorporating those classic Love is Rage elements. At the start of the album, Lil Uzi opens us up with Flooded the Face. Now, to me, this song ain't really set the tone of the album. To me, it didn't hit like how previous opening songs have been for Lil Uzi. I'll give you examples. Love is Rage 2, when you heard the song 2, that's an opening song. That's how you open up an album. It sets the tone, it sets the vibe, and it flowed much better than Flooded the Face into Suicide Doors. Now, even in Eternal Atake, Baby Pluto, hearing that flow and hearing that opening fresh out of the drought that listeners of Lil Uzi were in, come on now. That's how you open an album. And so when we get to Flooded the Face on the Pink Tape, I'm kind of thrown for a loop. I'm like, this might not be it. This might not be it. And that was until Suicide Doors came in and we heard that Charleston White's voice. Now, that's the real opening of the album, if you ask me. After you hear Charleston White's voice, when you start to hear those vocals and you start to hear the beat come in, you instantly get into that mode. You get into that hype mode. That was a good song. I appreciated that song. And now we move on to, I think, A, feature with Travis Scott. Now, personally, I don't prefer Lil Uzi to drop albums with features unless we get in something with Cardi. Or he does something like what he did with Sid on Urgency on Eternal Atake. And the reason why I don't prefer features on Uzi's albums is because usually they don't match the vibe. Their verse is always kind of like slightly off of what the central theme of the song may be for Uzi. So I'm just like, I could do without it. Especially when it comes to Travis Scott and anybody really in Jack Boys, to be honest, because Don Toliver, I didn't really appreciate that song either. I'm from Houston, so I know I should be a little bit biased towards them, but the way they do their vocals, it didn't flow with any of the songs that they were on with Uzi. Like, I don't know, if they would have came maybe with some different presets, maybe, but I just didn't really. It wasn't for me. I'm going to just say that. I'm pretty sure there are people out there who enjoyed that song, but it just wasn't for me. That Baby Metal song, wasn't too memorable for me. The Werewolf song, I appreciated it. Can't say it's my favorite, but I do appreciate it. They did their thing. My guy Corey, he told me that like if you grew up in that era where it was some anime like fight scenes and it got the like AMV tracks on there and stuff like that, that kind of like a nod to that type of I guess that era. So when he said that, I was like, I could see that, because I was definitely on YouTube watching them Naruto fights, watching them Bleach fights. So I get where he was coming from on that. That song and that feature, they get some points. The Endless Fashion song with Nicki gets some points too, just because of the flow and where Uzi got that flow from. And that's from, I'm Good and I'm Feeling All Right, the Blue Dabuda flow. So it gets some points for that. But I'm telling you that Nicki feature, I could have done without it. He could have just gave us a song without that Nicki feature. But it just wasn't for me. It was for somebody else, but it wasn't for me. Now to get into some of my personal favorites. Like I said before, I appreciated Suicide Doors. I appreciated Amped. Appreciated X2. Appreciated Spin Again. That was cool. I know some people ain't really like that song just because of the lyrics, which is understandable. But that beat and that flow, come on now. I see what he was doing. If we would have, fix up the lyrics a little bit, that would have definitely been the one. That Fire, Jump Off the Porch with That Fire. Yes, sir. I Gotta, that's a good song to me. I appreciate the beat. I appreciate the way it makes me feel. Nakamura, I appreciate that song a lot because that's definitely pushing the bounds of rap music, music as a whole, and what Uzi can really do. Pluto to Mars, of course, the snippet. Come on now. That's classic Love is Rage. That's classic 2016 SoundCloud era Uzi. Those are all my personal favorites. And I'm going to give a shout out to, the honorable mentions, which are the leaks. But if you was really tapped in, and you really about this music stuff, bro, you would have heard them songs 3 years ago. So come on now. You get some points for that, but we already heard it. Overall, I think that Lil Uzi is pushing the bounds of rap music and just music as a whole. Like I said previously, we see this through his versatile flows that he's displayed throughout the entire album. From top to bottom, even on the songs that I didn't like, it's a bunch of different flows. I know people don't really like he's so versatile on these albums because usually people go into these albums expecting one thing because they are caught up in this old aesthetic that Lil Uzi has, and then Lil Uzi gives something totally different. And that's where I think most of the criticism comes from. People already have a hard time adjusting to change, especially when it comes to music. And so when you portray one sound or one aesthetic and you give them something that they were totally not expecting, they're going to fight you tooth and nail every single time. They're going to complain. We saw this with Eternal E-Tape. People complained about that album when that album first dropped. And then they went back and they was like, oh, okay, I like this song. I like that song. This might be the one. We know the narrative that was going on around that time, early pandemic, when Lil Uzi dropped Eternal E-Tape. And then people forget, and it's more of like a what have you done for me lately type of thing. So that's where a lot of his criticism comes from, is people expect one thing and then he gives them something totally different, right? Another point of contention, another critique of Lil Uzi on this album is that this is not the most lyrical album at all. If you come into this album expecting lyrics and you expect just thought-provoking bars, you're not getting that out of this album. I don't know why people come to Uzi's music and expecting the most thought-provoking bars. Trust me, don't get me wrong. We know Uzi is very capable of giving us bars that are that was pretty fire. But when it comes to Uzi, it's really just about the flows. It's really about the vibes, how it makes you feel, the new age R&B type of Love is Rage type of flow that he puts on things. You're basically chasing feels. Some people chase nostalgia, but that's essentially what you're coming to Uzi's music for. And then you're also coming to see what that next sound of music is going to be like. Whether people want to acknowledge it or not, Uzi and Cardi, but mostly Uzi, they are the tastemakers of the new sound. What happened when Cardi dropped that Whole Lotta Red? Rage beats came, right? Okay. Yeat made his whole career off of that. You can agree with me or you can say that I'm full of BS, but personally, Yeat kind of got that rage flow right after the Cardi stuff, right? All these rappers started to drop these rage flow type beats. Even Trippie Redd came out with Mr. Rage. So, and that's Cardi on a minor extent. Lil Uzi has definitely influenced so many of these new artists. I mean, come on now. The way that people do these ad-libs, the way that some people do their songs, the flows, come on. It is really undeniable at this point. And even with this punk rock aesthetic, come on, we are literally seeing this. Give it a couple months from now, you might see more people, flirting with this aesthetic. Even some of these underground artists are starting to come out with these rock type of albums. I was just listening to Santana, Baby Santana's album. I think it's called Galter or something like that. That was kind of a rock album. If you ask me, I mean, some of the beats, some of the flows kind of seem like a rock album. So just bringing it back to Lil Uzi and this album, this Pink Tape, he is definitely pushing the bounds of music. I'm curious to see where this goes. This album was definitely made for the Gen Z audience, very early 2000s, maybe even late 90s. And I say this because that kind of cohort of people, late 90s, very early 2000s, grew up in an era of pop rock songs. Think of Paramore, think of Panic at the Disco, think of all those white boy songs that, people make fun of, but definitely enjoy. That's a huge cultural moment for a Gen Z. A lot of Gen Z folks, me included, love some of these pop rock songs. So when Lil Uzi is blending these sounds and these aesthetics, you can kind of see why some people are very open to this album. And it's usually the young folks. Old niggas, they're not going to accept it. No matter how hard you try, they're not going to accept it. But the young folks, I think this album was for them. And you can definitely see that Uzi still has his hand in, people high school, maybe early young adult years. So I think that overall, as time goes on, in hindsight, people will see this as somewhat of a pivotal album. I'm just kind of wondering where this fits in the broader scheme of just music and the next sound as a whole. Just rock and the punk aesthetic is kind of the new thing right now. But if you pay attention to some of these smaller artists, but some of the ones that have more popularity buzz, I'm thinking of Baby Santana, I'm thinking of Slump Sixes, I'm thinking of Jace, I'm thinking of Summers. It'll be interesting to see what kind of sound that they're going to be pushing next. Because I don't really think that they are going to lean too heavily in that punk rock aesthetic. So I don't like rating albums. I'm going to just say that this was a pretty good album. It's a decent album. I definitely have some songs that I'm going to continuously play back. But overall, again, it's just pushing the sounds of music and definitely very curious to see where this takes us next. Alrighty. Thank you. Listening to my review. Please go to www.theciviltune.com, read some articles, learn some more about music. We really break down everything about music business, music mediums, music theory. We have insights on women in hip hop, insights on drugs and music, a whole bunch of stuff. So again, please go to www.theciviltune.com. Please support, please check out some articles, and stay tuned for the next podcast.